Okay, good. And so we move on to the apologies for absence and substitutions.
I've had apologies from Councillor John Leach, who has been substituted by Councillor Ian Halsall.
Thank you, Ian, wherever you are. Oh, there you are. Yeah, appreciate you coming along. Declarations of interest. Looking at the agenda, does anybody feel they need to say anything about their activities? No? Okay, fine. So we move on to urgent business agreed by the Chair. I don't have any urgent business, so we'll move on to item 6. We won't keep up this pace, sadly. And we move on to public statements, and I'm very pleased to say that we have Malcolm Baldwin with us, who is going to talk to us about the importance of livable neighbourhoods to communities within our heritage environment. So when you're ready, Malcolm, we'll start the clock.
Good morning. To some of us, the rationale of livable neighbourhoods, LNs, was never about mere traffic interventions. For those who viewed the earliest implementations of LNs in our city as, to quote a phrase, low-hanging fruit, were wrong then, and would remain wrong if we don't press a reset button and grasp a larger vision. That vision should be to pursue those livable neighbourhoods where champions already exist. A livable neighbourhood which will deliver real value, not just to a particular local neighbourhood, but to Bath's citywide community as a whole. A new administration of any political persuasion pressing the reset button should not lack ambition, but come out swinging. The media and other propagandists are guilty of creating narratives that divide communities instead of bringing them together. That errors may have been made in early LN implementations is less important than the fact that key councils and officers have listened and are now actively adjusting some of the introduced measures accordingly. A meaningful LN should deliver not just necessary and desirable traffic interventions, but improve and underpin as many aspects as possible of the public realm in which they are introduced, encouraging and enhancing the health and general condition of that local community, as well as, in the case of key heritage areas in our city, its visitor and tourist economy. LNs introduced and targeted with real vision and imagination could significantly assist key heritage zones, such as my own Cara catchment area, in creating better management of the fast increasing pedestrian tourist visitor footfall that we are currently experiencing. This in addition to improving the overall environmental condition for local residents and businesses. This is where the real added value lies of introducing in any next phase a meaningful livable neighbourhood. Over-tourism is already becoming manifest in some of our key heritage areas. The difficulties, fast increasing for many Bath heritage areas such as our own, which are vitally important to our overall city economy, now require imaginative intervention and significantly improved resolution of the current toxic mix of vastly increased local and visitor footfall and the continued and dangerous culture of motor vehicle rat running. A relatively low cost and, if necessary, from a financial point of view, phased but sensitively introduced livable neighbourhood could easily overshadow any hiccups experienced in earlier implementations and become an exemplar for other areas of Bath and indeed for other cities nationwide. Let's remember, success is judged by results, not merely by intentions. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Very good. Appreciate your words. Does anyone have any factual questions for Malcolm? Saskia?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Malcolm. What measures have been proposed for your local area?
I beg your pardon?
What measures have been proposed for your local area?
Well, we ourselves, as a residents' association, over a long period of consultation, have built up a particular concept. And that concept is relatively elaborate. It's not a single street intervention by any means. To explain our catchment area in geographical terms is about 970 households overall, and ranges from the back of Queen's Square, Queen's Parade particularly is where we start, and goes through quite a significant heritage swathe of the city, which includes Upper Gay Street, the Circus, Brock Street, and right up to Julian Road. Also a very mixed demographic area. So an appendix which you have attached, if you received it all right, to my note, indicates the map of our Carla catchment area and the various interventions, but also public realm aspects that we believe are interlinked. And the last thing I would say on that, conscious that I might maybe talk too much, is what we've been doing as a particular residents association is not expecting our council to do everything for us. So we've actually started initiatives ourselves on the public realm side in anticipation, hopefully, of improvements that we brought to, for example, a pedestrian precinct like Margaret's Buildings, and we're due to embark on another one which will cover Savile Row and Bartlett Street, that will get underpinned at a moment in time with an appropriate livable neighbourhoods. And to me and to us, it has never been about just traffic intervention, it's about the general improvement and enhancement of an area.
Thank you. Any other? Okay, so just before we move on, there is actually an item on this later in the agenda. You are welcome to stay if you wish.
Thank you for that.
Okay, we move on to the minutes. Are these accepted as a true record, and are there any comments or suggestions, questions that you want to make about the minutes? So can I assume that they are a true record? Would you raise your hands, please, if you think they're a true record? So, yeah, okay, thank you. Right, I shall sign it at my leisure. Okay, so we move on to item 8, which is the climate strategy overview. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong minutes. I'm looking at the minutes and not the agenda. Silly mistake. Yes, so it's the Cabinet Member update. Sorry, Sarah. The Cabinet Member item 8.
Hello, so there's lots happening, lots to update you on. I suppose we could start with some good news, which was that we released the Clean Air Zone report for 2022, the annual report, showing that nitrogen dioxide levels within the city have reduced 26% compared to 2019 levels, and just outside the city by 27%. So that's a bit of good news. Another happening that you can't have failed to notice on your way into the Guildhall is that green e-scooters and e-bikes have arrived in Bath through a new contract between the West of England Combined Authority and TIA. So we in Bath push really to go in the vanguard to try these out, and we're now finding for the rest of the West of England Combined Authority, and we're pushing hard now for further information on how their parking arrangements are going to be sorted in line with what's planned for Bristol, and when the long-term loan scooters will be available again to residents who had become dependent on them from the previous provider. The addition of e-bikes is really exciting, and it gives everyone an opportunity to find out without too much expense how e-bikes can really flatten Bath's hills. And in due course we'll be able to expand the area in which they operate. Another event that's happened over the summer is that 20 further experimental cycle hangars, so each has 6 bike parking spaces, are going in and around Bath, with one also in Keynsham and one in Radstock. These provide cycle parking for those who've got no room to store a bike at home, so they give people real choice in how they're going to move around. I believe that over half the spaces have already been booked, so we've demonstrated that there's a clear demand for this provision, and if they prove popular, we can, of course, look at the way that they look in the future. For now, it's a trial, and the design that we have is practical, it's relatively spacious for bikes, and permits the storage of bikes with baskets and child seats. Other things that are happening include the City Region Sustainable Transport Fund, which is a fund that we're working on in partnership with the West of England Combined Authority. So over the summer, there was a consultation on what was called Summer Valley Links, which aims to deliver improved cycling facilities and bus priority on the A367 and to the A367 and A37. So that consultation has concluded, and we look forward to seeing the report on that. There's a Bristol-Bath consultation currently underway, and it closes on the 1st of October. It aims to reduce the distance of the safe cycle route from Bath to Bristol by 4 miles, as well as reducing bus journey times. And I'd encourage everyone to respond. This is really about taking a strategic approach to sustainable transport modes. On bus routes, the news is less positive. Further bus routes have been lost over the summer. The West of England Combined Authority's Westlink demand responsive transport seems to be struggling to provide well for residents. There are quite a number of reports of the vehicles failing to turn up. With the assistance of Councillor Fiona Gawley and lots of other councillors, I should say parish and ward councillors from around North East Somerset, we have put together a proposed North East Somerset bus network, which we hope will be practical and also more cost effective than the routes that were previously in place, and it is on the desk of the West of England Combined Authority Mayor, and we hope that he'll decide soon to redirect some of his bus service improvement fund of £57 million to restore some supported buses, as the West Midlands Combined Authority Mayor Andy Street has recently done. In other news, the Green Transformation Team are inputting actively into the draft of the new local plan to ensure that when it comes out it continues to support our aspiration of being the greenest council. And I won't be covering climate or ecological emergency communications and public engagement because you're about to hear from Councillor Henman sitting next to me about that. But I will, if I can, I'll pop in to hear your conversation about food growing later, because I'll be really interested to hear how that goes. Thank you.
I'm glad to hear about that last sentence, because we may have a question to ask you as well at that time. For Sarah. Alex?
Thank you. Sorry, I've lost my voice. But my question is, about the bike hangers. We got one in my ward, which after a few teething issues is quite popular now. It's very good. And I was wondering, after the initial what we've got at the moment, would the council be up for having any more in Cambridgeham? Maybe on the A4, on the east sides of the town?
Absolutely. Actually, what I forgot in my update is that we think that the West of England Combined Authority is just on the point of probably consulting on a set of new locations for another pot of money, further round of hangers. So please, if anyone feels that they haven't been offered one and would like one, you should watch Council and West of England Combined Authority communications and take the opportunity, or email me right now, email me and we can pass that on, or the bike hangers email address, and we can get that message to the relevant officers.
Thank you. Thank you for the update, Sarah. On the issue of e-bikes and e-scooters, it is really good to see them including the e-bikes, but obviously the issue of parking and how they're left is a real problem. Could the panel request an update on storage, and should that be from WECA or from the provider of the e-scooters and e-bikes? Is that something we could do, Chair, for the next meeting?
Actually, why not? Yeah.
Because we had that ongoing issue with Roy where we didn't get the kind of proper scootage arrangements, so it would be really good if the panel could use its weight to do that. And then, say that again.
Was that a joke?
No.
That's all right.
And then the last point was just to pick up the point that Sarah made around input to the local plan. I think we talked about that in our pre-meeting before the meeting, that the panel would like to have that on our future work agenda. So could we work with the Green Transformation team so that we have their input on, what they've put into the local plan, and then we as a panel can consider what else, we want to say. Thanks.
Great, and we can I'll discuss with officers who the right people to come and talk to you about scooter and e-bike storage and parking is.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to go back to the parking arrangements, but I just want to ask why we didn't pursue this sooner, because Bristol pursued
the issue of on-street shared e-bikes and e-scooter hangers in February, so I just want to ask why we didn't pursue that sooner, because we knew that a new contract was coming in.
And we have been pursuing it. The problem being that once Void, the previous provider, knew that they were possibly not going to be reinstated as the provider, they were much less enthusiastic to respond to our requests. And the other issue we have is that, as you know, this is provided through the West of England Combined Authority, so we don't have as direct control as we might wish over it, but we are already demanding and will continue to demand improved parking arrangements.
Sorry, back to the Roy situation. When it was brought in, I could see that they were being dumped anywhere in our ward, and I did ask, and I was told, well, there's no parking facilities because it's a trial, and in a trial you can't do that. That trial, though, how long is a trial for? Because it seems to go on for, 3+ years?
As I understand it, the trial has been extended a number of times. What we anticipated was that the trial would run until government decided to permit, to legislate to permit the wider use of e-scooters, and that government has continually deferred taking that decision, which is, as I understand it, the reason why the trial has been extended. So it is still a trial. But we will be going out today with I hope today, with a press release with information about how people can, with the new provider, flag up problems with parking, and we will be pursuing that very proactively and with renewed vigour now that it is a new provider who will hopefully be highly motivated to respond to our requirements.
I just want to start by making the point, and we discussed this earlier, but about the provision of information prior to this meeting, because you did cover quite a bit there in your statement, whether we can get some of that prior to this meeting, rather than just having it sort of off the cuff. Then we got to sort of respond quite quickly. We can have some time to consider it and think a bit more robustly about questions we might want to ask you.
We can do that, yes. I think this has been added relatively recently as a standing agenda item based on what was going on at the corporate PDS panel. But if that's important to you, we can do that.
Okay. With the e-bike and e-scooter, I'm just wondering, have we got any idea yet from the revenue that's generated through the scheme, have we got any more granular idea of where that funding might be pushed towards, or is it just still an overarching?
That's an interesting question, and I think, as I understand it, discussions are still ongoing between the West of England Combined Authority and ourselves as to how easily and straightforwardly Baines will be able to access that money, or whether, in fact, the West of England Combined Authority would prefer to hang on to it and require an onerous bidding process to access it. So we're obviously pushing hard to suggest that it should come to us without too much of a process, so that it can be available for other sustainable transport type initiatives. But I believe that's still under discussion.
Okay. And then still on e-bikes is that I understand it still doesn't encompass all of Bath, and I'm just wondering what's preventing that. It's been rolled out to wider areas. Why hasn't that already happened?
I think over time we'll be looking to extend the areas, in discussion with ward councillors.
Okay. In future, if you could combine it to one question, that way we share. Yeah, I know. I get it. Saskia.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions on the Revenue and Capital Budget Monitoring Report that came out on the 13th of July. Should I ask them all in one go, or do you want me to ask them one by one?
I don't know if anybody else has any other questions. If not, I'll let you take the floor. Does anyone have any other questions? Okay. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. So there are some vacancies in parking services and network and traffic management. I wanted to ask if we're missing out on income due to these vacancies in parking management, and what vacancies are not being filled in network and traffic management.
I'm afraid that's Councillor Amanda Rigby's area rather than mine, so we can get her to get you a written response if you like.
Okay, thank you. And then recycling, I'm not sure if that sits with you. No? How?
But do ask away and we can get a response.
Okay, yeah, so this is about overspend. Pressures on recycled income sales due to current marking conditions. So if we could get a briefing on this from the officer, what the issues are, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm sure we can do that.
Thank you very much. And then going back to climate emergency and sustainable travel, vacancies in environmental monitoring, air pollution in particular, what vacancies were not being filled or are not being filled, and what work has not been done, because this is obviously a very important issue for us. So air pollution.
Again, I don't have the information and we can get it to you.
Okay, thank you. The last one is about parking income. So this is exceeding budget across the majority of locations. Can we spend this money on sustainable travel projects like school streets or extended hours for the park and ride bus services?
Again, that's more Councillor Rigby's area and, Director Chris Major, who aren't in the room, so we'll get a response to you.
Thank you. Chair, would it be possible next time if a Cabinet Member, Councillor Amanda Rigby, would be present at this meeting as well, so that we can address questions to her?
So who is it? Who is the Cabinet Member for this issue? Is it Manda? Yeah, I think Manda is coming to the next meeting, so you can ask her those questions, yeah. We share many Cabinet Members, and they're busy people, so, it's difficult. But as I understand it, she is coming to the next one. Thank you, Saskia. Right, any other questions before we let Sarah go and come back later on? Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. Right, we move on, I'll get it right this time. We move on to item 9, which is the engagement strategy for the climate and ecological emergency. I am allowing 40 minutes for this item. So, Ollie, when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's great to be with you again, as it was last time. And as we said last time, we are at the halfway point to 2030, so engaging with people is really crucial to delivering on all of the great things that Sarah's been highlighting and the wider work that we do as a council on the climate and ecological emergency. So the engagement strategy is really essential and really central to our direction as a new administration coming in. There's a great team in place and there's lots of additional capacity coming into this area. So if we can just go through the slides. The first slide we have is just giving you a bit of an overview. What's the thinking, what's the approach? And again, I think this will be very familiar to all of you in the room. Of course, the council can do some directly, can do some action on climate directly through our own operations. We've talked about recycling already, transport, we know about housing, retrofitting and so on. But there's also a lot we can do in terms of showcasing and sharing best practice, sharing knowledge, convening, providing a space to bring together all the key stakeholders, and that's something we'll definitely be talking more about. How do we as a council bring together all the great expertise that there is in the area, and many of the businesses that are also looking at how they transition towards net zero. And then finally, engaging. How do we engage better with local residents to tackle some of the points that were raised earlier about misinformation and the way that, unfortunately, there are campaigns out there that try to cast doubt on the climate emergency. It's so important that we highlight, the reality, the science, and also what we can do collectively to make a difference. So moving on to the next slide. There's quite a long list here. This is kind of looking back a little bit first in terms of what has been achieved already in recent years by the council in terms of engaging, in terms of connecting with local residents. So you'll know that there is a lot happening online, of course, social media, video clips, sharing of information, the A to Z of sustainability, getting advice and information out there. There's also been some quite practical changes in advice through the planning advice. You will have seen the new SPD around retrofitting. So that's an additional, a supplementary planning document, as far as I understand, which then gives additional guidance to planning officers to encourage them to look at retrofitting and sustainable construction, particularly in heritage buildings, because we know that traditionally that's been one of the barriers in our city. We've had the festival 2 years in a row, the Climate Festival, Climate and Biodiversity Festival, which happened around the Abbey and brought together many different groups, and that's really stimulated dialogue and led to some of the discussions now that we have around a climate hub and so on, bringing those different key stakeholders together. Renewable energy community conversations, and those are facilitated by the Centre for Sustainable Energy in local areas all around the whole district, particularly rural parishes, asking them where they would like to see renewables go in their area. Because again, the question around planning and local support for renewables is really key. Parish liaison working through the local area forums, the Climate Emergency Public Services Working Group, so that's specifically to engage with universities and the emergency services, for example. There's also a Climate and Nature Partnership Group, which is more on the business side of things, and that's linking up closely through the Future Action Board and looking at how to connect those businesses that are able to bring their own expertise and their own investment into this space. There's also working with the BID, the Large Business Forum, the Baines Business Show, so really trying to bring together all of those different stakeholders. In terms of more public-facing, there was also the very successful Festival of Nature, which Baines played a role in, of course, not as a lead, but as one of the support and conveners, and also the work with the Bath City Farm. So there's quite a wide range here of different activities that have happened, and we've been trying to gather the learning from those to then think forward what we can do over the coming administration. So there are some key themes, and again, these won't come as a surprise to you, and we're certainly open to thinking about these themes. This would be something we'd love to get your inputs. Clearly, the change needs to start at home, so the question around home energy, what we can do to encourage that move towards net zero in people's homes, the Solar Together pilot, which was run last year or the last 18 months, that's going to follow up. There's going to be some further opportunities for additional bids and for additional houses to look at getting solar at a reduced rate. There's the retrofit accelerator, which has just been launched, and the work with the West of England Combined Authority on that. Bright Green Homes and local energy advice demonstrator projects. So these are all different ways to showcase and highlight how people can make that change. And there's, of course, the Green Open Homes event coming up in November. And so that gives you a chance to see homes that are already, looking at retrofitting and solar and how you might take on some of the same approaches in your own home. So trying to make it as easy as possible for people to see the change and to make it as cost effective for them, particularly on low incomes, to be able to make those changes at home. Secondly, a big theme around individual and community action for both climate and nature. And of course, this ties in with a lot of the community conversations, the engagement that we talked about before at the parish level, and of course there's the Climate Emergency Hub. So this is something that's come from the community. Many of you, I'm sure, will be familiar. There's been a demand and a wish for a climate hub in the city, and a group has formed. They've been in touch with us. We're actively looking at ways as a council to enable and empower them to become that space that can connect across all the different climate groups, and hopefully have a space in the centre of Bath and around the whole district. We're also looking at how we work more closely again with those different festivals that we mentioned, in a supportive role, providing expertise, providing resource where possible, providing ability to share knowledge. And then finally, on the economic side, we talked a little bit already about the importance of engaging with businesses. So one of the things that businesses are being encouraged to do at the moment is to engage on the economic strategy, which is being drafted, and there'll also be the new local plan, which Sarah mentioned, which is coming up. So there's an opportunity there to embed this low carbon into those key economic plans for the district going forward. And part of that is a donut economics workshop, and we'll come on to that in just a second. You may be familiar already with Kate Rayworth and the idea of donut economics, so that's something we'll be exploring. So if we go to the next slide, so these are some quite practical steps just to get us started. And this is really only for the remainder of this year. So there's lots of space also for your inputs going forward beyond this year. But these are some of the upcoming engagement opportunities that are happening. So on the nature side, there's two big walking festivals, the Bathscape Walking Festival and the Summer Valley Walking Festival, which are already underway. That's already happening, and that's really a way to encourage people to get out and about and to make the most of our incredible local area, and very much supported by the team to enable and highlight where those different walks can happen, some of those guided walks. There's also the Green Infrastructure Strategy Workshop coming up, and that's something that's been worked on in terms of how the team itself then plans ahead and brings together different stakeholders to inform the Green Infrastructure Strategy. The Community Resilience Day, that's not something we run, the Environment Agency runs that, but it's something that brings the community together to talk about resources for community groups. And then, crucially, towards the end of the month and the beginning of next month, so there's the Extraordinary Earth Day happening in Bath Abbey, which is a good way to highlight and showcase what needs to happen. And then we have this meeting, which I mentioned briefly, around donor economics, and that's a stakeholder workshop hosted with Kate Raworth. So Kate Raworth looks at the sort of a different theory on how to live as a society within planetary boundaries and with a social base. So it's combining the social base and the planetary ceiling and making sure that we live within that realm. So that's the key thinking around donut economics, and we're really excited, I think, to have Kate Raworth and her team coming to Bath. And at the moment, we're looking at ensuring a good balance between different stakeholder groups to be part of that. And again, if you have suggestions of people who you think would benefit from being part of that workshop, let us know. We are still looking at that. But making sure that it's a good balance between those who come from a business side, those who come from households, those who might have a broader interest but have some particular expertise or knowledge that could be useful for that conversation. And then I've mentioned already the Green Open Homes, and then finally the Community Energy Conference later on in November. So to close, and hopefully also to help to kick off conversation, this has kind of shown some of what we think are the key areas. There are new people coming into the team. It's an exciting time. We're looking at now how do we build on that next year and over the coming years. So one of the key things we're looking for is to decentralise our approach. We don't want this just to be a conversation in Bath City Centre. This has to happen in all the different parts of the area, particularly working with parishes, local area forums. Can we think about those local area forums possibly in a different way, as a more community conversation, and have climate as a key part of those conversations? Can we then think about refreshing the climate strategy? I mean, the timing actually works quite well. So if next year, 2024, is the build-up to the next refresh of the climate strategy, so using or enabling conversations in different parts of the district to then inform that next strategy, and of course ensuring that we continue with all of the social media engagement that we talked about earlier, and making sure that people have a chance to hear about all the different opportunities for engagement. So it's really a partnership approach. I think we have to recognise that the council on its own is not going to be able to deliver everything. This is really about building partnerships, working with community groups, working with businesses, working with universities, working with experts, working with the West of England Combined Authority, connecting all of those different stakeholders to try to really drive change over these next few years, because this is the crucial time to make those changes. So I hope that covers a good overview. Back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. It's very impressive, I have to say. 12 minutes less than, and you covered a huge amount of ground. So are there any questions for Ollie? Saskia and then Anna.
Thank you for the update, Ollie. So I've got a question about transport as a missing theme. So providing leadership for others by showcasing. So the three priorities are home energy, supporting individual and community action, and a sustainable local economy. Within the priority of individual and community action, there's a big focus on high-level engagement activities such as community conversations, but not much tangible engagement around transport. One of the most empowering and positive actions an individual can take is to change some of their car journeys to walking, wheeling, or cycling. Like you said it all starts in your home. Well, I think a big thing can also happen when you step outside of your home, and this is something that, with the cost of living crisis, using a different mode of transport can actually save you a lot of money and time, while investing in your home may be very tricky for a lot of people at this stage. So in general, what can we do as a council to showcase the range of travel choices people have? More travel choices is one of the 9 priorities within the corporate strategy, which was approved earlier this year. With the TIA shared e-bikes now having arrived to Bath, could we look into encouraging councillors to use these and share their experiences with the community? And I would also like to suggest that councillors based in the City of Bath would no longer be eligible for free parking when attending council business, because I believe they could be taking a bus or walk or wheel or cycle. Unless they're a blue badge holder, obviously. I believe this is an outdated policy and not in line with our climate and ecological emergency. We need to provide leadership for others by showcasing our actions. Thank you.
Great. Well, I can say that I actually came in today on the TIA bike. I tested one out myself earlier, and I found it incredibly easy. And you're right. I mean, the app is very quick, and once you're on the bike, the electric just gives you so much more confidence in the middle of traffic. So I think they're brilliant, and I agree with you. I think that absolutely transport is obviously a key part of this agenda, and you're absolutely right. We'll make sure that we add more about that into the communications plan. I think obviously it ties in with other portfolios, and you'll be hearing from Joel later. And of course, some of what you've said in terms of the parking sits with Manda, as Sarah has said. But absolutely, in terms of the communicating, engaging, showing people how easy it is to make those active travel choices, absolutely. I will take away the suggestion as well around taking away the free parking for councillors. Obviously, that's beyond my scope, but certainly feed that back. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. So thank you for your hard work and the officers around the engagement, and I was warmed to see that a lot of the information you've regarded is very grassroots in regards to the residents. I'm the ward member for Chew Valley, and I would say ecological issues are very high priority there. Unfortunately, we're now working in the framework of Westminster Government, who launched their strategy for net zero in 2021. A cross-party MP review in April of this year said that the current rate of policy delivery in the UK government will miss their decarbon target for the midterm, so 2035. It also went on to criticise the government around resources for councils, especially around ecological planning. Now, you can understand the frustration of our residents, my residents especially, about the feeling the rate of change. So can we think of a mechanism as a council, as a wider council, to lobby Westminster, who are clearly dragging their feet around their own policy? Have you got any ideas around that?
Well, I think you're absolutely right that there is a real lack of commitment from central government, and unfortunately a lot of the ideas that had been there previously were then scaled back over these recent years, and it has made it very, very difficult. You're absolutely right. I mean, perhaps it's something for the committee to consider writing, directly to government. We can certainly also raise it. Of course, Sarah could also follow up and write if you had some form of words that you wanted us to take forward. But I think that's absolutely key. Of course, next year will be an election year, so let's see. Let's hope for a more engaged future on climate, whoever gets into power next time.
Most of the events you've conducted, and in terms of engagement, I think they seem to me anyway to be targeted more at people that probably have an active interest in the climate emergency and climate change and nature, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think that could have flip side effect of creating an echo chamber of opinions when we sort of need an engagement strategy for those people that might not share our opinions and might not have a positive attitude to any of the things you mentioned in the slides. And I think any part of a strategy for engagement with residents in Bath and North East Somerset needs to consider those individuals that probably don't want to engage, and how we can, what aspects can we change to actually filter that through to those individuals. Otherwise, I don't think it's going to be as effective at changing people's attitudes and approaches in everyday life, certainly in rural areas like where I represent. And then the only other thing, and this is a bit more convoluted, I would admit, but you did mention about social media and the use of social media, and I think the flip side of social media is the negative side, and unfortunately there has been massive sways, and a lot of it can be really politicised, especially, and I saw the little note about weeds being great. But that's also a tool that's used in a negative way to beat the council from all different areas, whether it's residents or councillors or different political parties. And I just wondered how your social media approach can counteract that, engage with that, and actually deal with that in a positive way, and stop this sort of abundance of negativity towards our council.
Yeah, I think those are brilliant observations. Thank you, Grant. And I think the first point you made about getting outside the kind of comfort zone, not just speaking to those who are already committed and interested, is a really essential point. I guess, there's sort of several ways to do that. One of the examples that we gave was around the Solar Together, and that's aimed not necessarily at those who are already thinking about this. It's aimed at making it more affordable for those who might not otherwise have been thinking about, and actually saying to someone, well, if you were to think about, solar as an option, that would actually reduce your bills. So it's trying to frame this not only about, some aspirational change, but actually about practical change that this can actually, and I think as Saskia mentioned before, the same with travel, that actually can bring people's bills down, it can make things more cost effective. So I think you're right. I think it's about how we get a message that is not necessarily too preachy. It's a message that is just giving practical suggestions, showing people that these are changes that can actually reduce their bills, these can make people's lives easier. So I think part of it is how we frame the message. The other thing I would say that we highlighted on the slides as well is to have more community-level conversations. So, as I said, we don't see this as a conversation only happening here in Bath, in the city centre. It needs to be happening at rural, parish level with those who are active within their community, identifying different meeting spaces that people will feel comfortable. If people are meeting in a youth club, how can we have that conversation in the youth club with people who are already meeting? So go to the places where people feel comfortable, so it doesn't feel like it's something that's a formal meeting that they have to go into the council chambers to join. So trying to decentralise and break down those conversations to a more local level. Hopefully that can reach more people. And then finally, on your point around social media, again, I completely agree with you. I've seen that myself, how toxic it can be. And I suppose one of the key things for the council team is, again, to just always provide information in a clear way that is easily shareable, but very, very rigorous in terms of evidence, because a lot of what we see is people just putting in misinformation that is not evidence-based. There isn't a silver bullet, and we can't stop people from retweeting things that are not true, but I think if we can put out the true story and we can signpost to where that is on the website and people can find that information as easily as possible, often transparency reduces the risk of that misinformation. And I suppose I think that's really where we want to be, and that's where the new focus and hopefully the additional team members will really drive forward more information, easily accessible information.
I was very interested in the presentation that you gave, and I know that a lot of the events and activities seem very focused around Bath, and I do understand that. So in terms of looking forward to kind of 2024, I'd be very happy to work with you in terms of what we can do in Midsom Norton. And I'm running a kind of clinic at a farmer's market every month, and that might be a good opportunity to be giving out information and engaging with people directly there. And also, I'm also attending town council meetings every month as well as an observer. But also there are other, and just getting to know more of the groups that are, the Summer Valley Walking Festival is a big event, but there may be other things that we can do, so I would certainly be keen to work with you in reaching out away from Bath into bigger areas in Baines. Okay.
Well, just to say thank you, and we'll absolutely look forward to that, and I think that's absolutely one of the plans, is to have those decentralised conversations. It ties in also with what Grant was saying before. We'd really welcome those suggestions of where to engage and who might be open to partner up with some of those conversations.
Thank you. I just basically, in a way, I'm reiterating what I said at the last meeting when it comes down to the community getting more involved. And I just wondered if any steps had been made, because I feel that each ward maybe should be gone to, and you go through the councillors because they've got more contact with their residents, and hopefully will be able to make people more interested in coming along. I just wondered if anything were happening in that direction.
Well, again, I mean, very much in line with the last two. That's absolutely where we do want to go, and that's very much the approach that we'll be taking going forward, to have conversations in local areas. So again, if you've got suggestions of when we might do that in your area, absolutely we'll be getting in touch and looking forward to having those different discussions, community level conversations, absolutely. When you say in your area, are you referring to each ward, or just, well, me, because I've just said what I've said today? So, do you know what I mean? I think the idea would be to look strategically across the whole Baines area and actually specifically say, okay, let's focus on Keynsham over this coming week, let's focus on Midsummer Norton, let's focus on Redstock, let's focus on different wards within Bath, let's look at North Bath, let's look at Central Bath, and break it down into different areas. And over the year, this is something we'll be looking at in 2024, we'd have different conversations throughout the year in different parts of the district.
I just think it's important to bring in the councillors who represent their wards and who obviously have far more contact and knowledge and know a lot more people who might say, oh yes, I'm going to go to that because councillor so-and-so thinks it's... Do you know what I mean?
We will definitely come back to you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Ollie. It's really good to see all the momentum in the engagement work. I had a couple of points. One around, it was good to see the council's press release calling for green open homes and, to get people to come and see some of these things. But could the scope of that be widened in future so that we don't just look at energy and solar panels, but we also look at things like amazing biodiverse front gardens and rainwater harvesting and how people are really using their properties to contribute to the local environment? And I think that kind of links to Grant's point. A couple of months ago, I had a really good conversation with the ladies who run Blooming White Way, and they started out as a front garden competition, and it was a really good, visible way to network members of the community that just love growing in different ways and kind of highlight their achievements and encourage other people to give it a go. And they put out free plants outside their gardens and just, encourage that sense in the community about growing and kind of keeping your front space, so to speak, a bit more wild. And those of us with wards in Outer Bath, and I'm sure in other areas across Baines, we're lucky to have a lot of properties with front gardens, and it's a really good asset that we should encourage people to keep. And then the second point I wanted to make was in the list of engagement activities, you mentioned the Bristol and Bath Nature Festival back in June, Festival of Nature. I went to the family event at the Apex Hotel and I thought that was brilliant. There were hundreds of children running around and so many different organisations with interactive displays, and I thought it was a really brilliant event. Could we look at extending that and involving schools more during the week? It's not something I think I heard about through any of my kids' schools, but I think that's a really good event to build on.
Again, great suggestions, absolutely. I think the point that you made about the green open homes not being only about solar and renewables, but also looking at, as you said, biodiversity in gardens, rainwater capture. I think that's a brilliant idea, absolutely. I think that's definitely something we can take back and explore how we can widen that out. And then your point about children and young people as a particular audience, as a kind of stakeholder group, if you like, I think that's a really good point as well. And you're right that schools are clearly, a major potential area for discussion and for further engagement. Yeah, great, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, schools are really into this, so I think you'll be pushing an own door, to be honest.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 points. One about food. So after transport, food and food waste is the next biggest thing we can have an impact on as individuals. So going back to that individual engagement with individuals and community action, what can the council do to engage more people about food? Something with restaurants and producers to showcase, celebrate and challenge them on what they've done already and what they are doing. Could we look into engagement with schools and academies, how they're looking at food provision? Yeah, I guess again, like with transport, we need to showcase leadership. So what are the council's own food policies, and are we showcasing this to the residents? And then the second point is, I guess it ties in with schools. What can the council do to bring together all schools in one coordinated project? I think there are projects around like Energy Spark, so we do have local school projects. Can we engage children and their parents in something bigger while uniting our schools in that mission?
Again, I mean, excellent suggestions, really appreciate it. I think the point about food, I understand you'll be discussing a bit later anyway, but absolutely it's something that we could...
sorry, this was not about local food growing, but about what you buy and how you dispose of it.
Okay, sure. Sorry, I understand what you mean now. And I suppose that then ties in with the wider communications, encouraging people to also recycle their food waste. Yes, absolutely. I think that is something that we can incorporate. And I also take on board your point that restaurants and food producers should be another one of the stakeholder groups that we look at. I think that's a really good point. And looking at their supply chains and looking at where their waste goes, I think that's a really, really good point. And schools likewise ties in with what Jess was saying. So looking at schools not just from the engagement point of view, but also their own production and supply chain as well. That's a really good point. And when you say bring together all schools in a project, would that be a kind of a moment to have a dialogue across all the schools, or you mean that they each take on a project that's part of something bigger? How would you see that?
I don't know exactly how, but yes, something, I guess. I wanted to point out that obviously lots of children, they all have their own families, so I guess getting something across to children who are all very keen on nature, biodiversity, climate emergency, if we can do something with them, that would be fantastic.
I just want to, have we got the Student Community Partnership involved in any of this? Because they're a very good outlet for contacting and getting people involved.
Again, that's a good suggestion. I think as far as I understand, we're talking to the university so far, but you're right, the students as a body... Student Community Partnership, I think, would be really, really important to involve in it. And also Bath in Bloom. I'm adding all these, absolutely, very helpful. And I think, again, these are really useful for us when we're mapping out all the different key stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Ollie, may I ask about the hub? Now, I know there was a person who came across to full council and spoke about it, and I have no idea what a pro bono hub would be in Central Bath, but my guess is plus 60k a year per annum in costs if you were going to do that. I'm sorry to always bang my North East Somerset drum, but if we allowed it as a council for this to go through the budget, could we possibly put a kind of caveat on it that there would be a wider North East Somerset engagement with this group of people, and that they would do satellite, clinics or engagement or policy ideas across the whole region? Because I'm concerned that a wonderful idea like this hub will become quite Bath-centric again, and I imagine some of my North East Somerset colleagues may feel the same way.
So what I can say is that a conversation has been ongoing, and as you say, they came to the full council. Sarah and I met the Climate Hub. They've shared their business plan. I understand they are fundraising and they've raised some funds already. I think that the idea of ensuring that it reaches across, any future Climate Hub reaches across the whole Baines area is a really good point. We did raise that with them when we discussed it with them, and we highlighted to them, if they were to then work in collaboration with the council, one of the things we would be looking for exactly is that it doesn't only happen in Bath, that this is something that happens across the whole Baines area. I think as far as the venue is concerned, they're looking at different options, and I think that's something that still is ongoing. Whether there's anything that the council itself has, that's still a question mark. But there are also some private spaces that are currently sitting empty. I know they're also approaching those as well. So we'll see where that gets to, and we'll keep you informed. Right. As it's a bit of time, I've got a question. I don't normally chip in, but we have a bit of a problem, and I'm so impressed with your enthusiasm. I'm going to lob it your way and see if you can deal with it. I've been trying for the last 4 years. There's a group in Keynsham called the Keynsham Community Energy Company, or they're a non-for-profit company, and they've been trying to put up solar panels on the roof of the Civic Centre so that they can get cheap energy into the leisure centre, which is very close. Now, an ex-colleague, an ex-councillor, Alistair Singleton, has been heavily involved in this, and he has had huge problems actually finding a way to put the solar panels, which the community company, the Keynsham Community Energy, will pay for, so that the thing can click through. And it's just not happened. And so I'm going to ask you if you can go away and see if you can figure out what on earth the problem is with this. It's a horrible administrative mess, I suspect. But you look like the sort of person who may be able to untick all those bits to actually get it happening, because it's something that the community wants, and it's obviously, it seems as though it's just annoying because everything seems to be in place, but it just doesn't seem to be happening. I lob it at you, sorry. No, I think it's a really good proposal, and I think definitely there's a commitment to find a solution for that. I think it has to do with planning at the moment, but I don't know whether... Do you want to...
Yeah, I'm very happy to just take it. The team is working with various entities, and I don't want to say it's a bureaucratic issue. It's a legal and technical issue which your officials are working very hard. Okay, well, I'm reassured because it seems to fit so well with what we're trying to achieve, and it's our own buildings that are actually seem to be available for such a good scheme. Just for the record, Alistair Singleton, previous councillor of this parish, has done a brilliant job on this issue.
Yeah, no, we'll certainly take it forward. And it might be that it's the leisure centre itself that could be the venue for it in the future. Let's see.
Yeah, the guy from the leisure centre is fine. I've spoken to him on a number of occasions, and I absolutely agree with Alistair's input. He's the chair of the group, and he's really dedicated to getting it done. And if he's struggling, then we're all struggling, frankly. Anything for anybody else? Okay, well that's good. With your knowledge and your enthusiasm, so please come again, and thank you for your time, all of you. Right, so we move on to the next item, which is the Liverpool Neighbourhood update, and I was looking at the Liverpool Neighbourhoods Baines website. I was quite impressed with what I saw there, Joel, so over to you.
Great. Thank you, Chair. It's nice to be back in the panel.
Sorry.
Oh,
can I just say you've got 40 minutes?
40 minutes, okay, perfect. We've got, as part of the officer team here as well, Kath Brown, who's the Senior Project Manager, and Tom Foster, Head of Delivery and Transformation and the Place Management. So the plan today was to do a bit of a verbal update with the hope for sort of jam tomorrow of coming with a full report and probably presentation
we've suggested November to kind of update the panel in more detail. So I was wanting to kind of focus a little bit on the resident parking zone piece and the progress we've made since May, and then talk about the livable neighbourhoods. In terms of, to help the panel in terms of sort of the governance, I started in the Cabinet project role in May after the election, and I report into Councillor Rigby, Amanda Rigby, Cabinet lead member for the highways. And kind of since May, it kind of feels like there's a huge amount that's been going on, albeit that maybe from the external, the outside, it doesn't look like an awful lot's been going on, but that there's been a tremendous piece of work that is ongoing. And there's kind of a challenge of balancing the Cabinet's desire to kind of move further and faster on the Livable Neighbourhoods programme, and to balance that with really the reality of the detail, the statutory requirements, the resource capacity of the council, and then the bonus joy is the relationship with WECA, where the majority of the funding is coming from, and trying to get that relationship and dialogue right, so that they can kind of support us in expediting the schemes. And then the extra bonus also is we've got 15 schemes for livable neighbourhoods. We've got lots of new councillors who maybe weren't owning the schemes that had developed in the last 4 years, and so how we kind of keep those people on board, and kind of also everybody's been in the run-up to the election knocking on doors and developing new ideas about how we kind of then manage the pipeline beyond the 15 schemes that we've currently got. Very quickly, the policy objective, I think, is fairly clear, but it's about health and well-being, safer, more attractive travel routes, fewer people relying on cars for short journeys, reduced noise, congestion, commuter parking in residential areas, and good engagement with the community. In the run-up to the local election, the livable neighbourhood piece did create quite a large amount of debate. And I think the Cabinet's view is that the election outcome was seen as a strong mandate for moving forward with this programme and developing this as best we can. And following on from that, the Council adopted unanimously the corporate strategy, which particularly, and I think Saskia mentioned it already, talked about the priority of more travel choices. So if I focus first of all on the RPZ programme and what we've done, I'll pause to give maybe a chance for engagement and then talk about specifically the livable neighbourhood piece. So since May, we've delivered 2 further residence parking zones, the Walcott, Snow Hill, Claremont Road scheme, which went operational from the end of July. And then we have the Oldfield Park Westmoreland scheme, which went operational from the 29th of August. That was delayed. The 2 were supposed to go live at the same time, but we, as part of the engagement with the residents, the decision was to take some experimental traffic regulation orders to be able to create some more shared use and visitor parking in that zone. That zone was particularly complex, but I don't want to underplay the Walcott zone, which was also complex as well, and it's had its own challenges. But the Oldfield Park zone was particularly complex because you've got a significant retail activity area there. You've got a significant student population. So it's trying to balance the needs of the residents versus the needs of the community, which is slightly different and sometimes clashing slightly, to kind of get the right balance. So the implementation of those 2 schemes completes 7 that were in total that were delivered from the last administration going into this administration. And I guess the things to kind of just touch about the residence parking schemes in general is that broadly they're cost neutral, that the cost of charging for the permits covers the cost of implementation and the running costs. I think there was a question about parking costs, and it will be good to Amanda and maybe Chris Major or the parking team come to brief the panel to explain. But my understanding is that income from parking schemes broadly are ring-fenced and protected and can't be used to kind of bail out other black holes in council budgets, if there are any. In terms of then the process around applying for permits, that's all information's on the website, and there's a process also for people who aren't IT fluent, and so you can apply via telephone as well and through the one-stop places. The visitor permits are available. The hierarchy on the charging now is linked to emission-based charging. So for a first car, it ranges between £50 and £250. For a second car, £80 to £400 per annum. Blue badge holders can park in free in the resident parking bays. And then you can apply for 1, 3, 6 and 12-month permits. I'll probably pause there and just see whether people want to pick up on the RPZ piece first of all and then move on to livable neighbourhoods.
Yeah, I just like the way you're trying to sort of get more time. I like that. It's good. Right, okay. Any questions? Right, Jean and then Saskia and then Ian.
Thanks, Joel. I just wanted to ask, when a new development is now coming into Westmoreland Ward, which is part now of the new Zone 28 RPZ, will they be entitled to buy in to both the residence permits and visitors?
I'm not sure, so I'm going to defer to my... We'll take that away and come back. Yeah.
Right, okay. Also, the money, I sort of felt from what you said that the money that that has been gained from it, I can't quite think of the right word, are you expecting it to run evenly so there will never be an excess or an under amount? Because where are we as regards the number of officers we've got going around to monitor and enforce it?
Yeah, and that's a really good point. So I think we've not increased the officer enforcement team for quite a while, but we've grown at least these 7 and maybe more before that. And so there is a challenge about actually making sure that that's certainly going to be looked at in the budget process. And I think there's a proposal to increase the enforcement team. I think there are, and it's not my expertise around this, but I think there's quite strict rules about parking income for councils and what you can use it for. So I think broadly my headline of that it should be cost neutral is right, but if there is an excess, then my understanding is that has to be used for things to do with sustainable transport and around parking issues, and it can't be used, diverted further afield. But my understanding is it's a bit of a myth that's out there that people think it's a major income generator in terms of the parking zones, and that's not the case.
So was the money, how did you sort of like decide the cost of a permit? Did you base it on the cost of running the scheme, including having the officers who go around to monitor and enforce it? How was all that worked out? Because there's a big difference with other RPZ costs.
That's a good question, June. And I sort of came into the implementation before we set the cost. But my understanding is I think there's a bit of a market assessment about what's a fair and reasonable and proportionate amount to charge, and that's partly looking at what other councils do as well, and then also then factoring the issues that you've mentioned. I don't know. Yeah.
Because I think we've got to make sure that residents don't feel that they're paying for something which actually financially is not being able to be monitored and enforced.
And that is absolutely right, and I think the council has had challenges retaining and keeping enforcement officers, because I think once they start working for the council, I think quite often it's an entry point in, they realise how lovely it is to work for the council and then move up in different roles within the council. So my understanding, I'd have to again check with Manda and the team, but I think that we've been running with about 1/3 vacancy rate on the parking enforcement, and that is an ongoing challenge, and as we grow the geography of the zones, that becomes more challenging, because the worst scenario is if a resident pays for the parking and then somebody is then breaching that and not getting enforced, so somebody's parking in their spot, so to speak.
because I find it hard to believe that, say, a 2-hour dual-use purpose bay doesn't have, is unable to be monitored to check that those vehicles that were there for their 2 hours have gone, so that it releases it for other people.
There's been quite a significant focus, and the team will help me with this, around enforcement of the new zones in particular, and that there's been, well, at the moment we're still very much in the soft phase of kind of putting notices on, telling people as not enforcing the fines at this stage. I think we might be coming to the end of that in the Walcott zone.
How long is that for? Sorry, how long are you doing these blue warning notices?
It's 4 weeks.
It was 4 weeks.
4 weeks.
So we're 4 weeks.
With Moreland Road, because of the student factor,
who aren't all yet back.
Who are all back, we need to factor that into the equation.
I just want to say, at the moment, the scheme is working divinely.
All right.
However, we have not yet got the universities for that, and that's only when you can realise how it's going. And I'm very much hoping it will work, but I have to ask questions that a lot of residents keep putting to me.
Yeah, and you do that very well.
Can I ask you a question, Jean? When you say the fees for the RPZs, is that fees with other councils or other parts of this council?
Yes, I mean, different councils, different areas, not involved obviously, charge different amounts for their permits. And I'm sure there's one in Bristol that's only charging £30.
I think that there was a news story that Bristol was just about to, I'd have to check, but I think they were going out to consultation about increasing their fees to round about the Baines level.
Right.
So, and I'd have to go back and look to give you the right assurance, but I think that they're quite careful at kind of making sure that we're pitching about the equivalent of where everybody else locally is doing.
Okay.
That was why, you see, I asked, how did you base?
Yeah, I get that.
How much you charge?
Thank you, Jean. Now, was it Saskia next? Yeah, and then it's Ian. Yeah, okay, and then it's Jess. Yeah, okay, good. Saskia?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Joel, for the update. I would have really appreciated a paper. I think we've mentioned this before, but in this panel, it would be really, really helpful to have something in writing so that we can prepare, we can do our role as scrutinising. We can do it well. Thank you. So in terms of RPZ, so the one in Walcott came in, and that's it ends basically in my ward in Lambridge, and there have been a lot of boundary issues, so to say, which I know you're aware of that. And I think there's an issue with, if you put in an RPZ, I'm completely for it, but what happens to the next area? So my question would be, what are the future plans for RPZ, and how can we request for another RPZ to be coming in, or how does that work? Thank you.
That's a really good question and timely question. So we have been very focused on the delivery of the two schemes up to date, but we've got a meeting having planned next week to talk about the pipeline of new schemes. So I've already collected some comments around the issues around the edge of Walcott, also similarly in Moreland and going up by the park, which is Sandpits Park, going into Jess's ward, and then similarly I think there's been requests also on the west of the city as well. So we need to work that through, and so that will be part of the piece that I'm hoping to bring back with a proper document and presentation around how we manage that pipeline of both RPZs and livable neighbourhoods. So you're absolutely right. The challenge is about, we've got quite a tight team in the livable neighbourhoods team who also deliver the RPZs, and we can't do everything, and in particular a lot of this is one of the bottlenecks potentially is the traffic order team, and everything traffic order team goes through quite a small number of people, so we have to kind of make sure that we've got the pipeline right and we've got the balance of officers right to kind of be able to keep moving forward and delivering in a sustainable way.
Thank you. Well, June has basically asked all the questions I was going to ask anyway, which is great, and we are neighbours anyway. Jill, thank you for that update. I just want to put on record how thankful I am for all the work that the team have put in over the past few months, especially with all the snagging details that we had in Oldfield Park and Westmoreland. So am I right in thinking Amanda Rigby is going to be making more detailed statements next month? Did I hear that correctly?
I think the plan is that we were going to come with a paper, probably me, right, but Amanda might be there for November to update on both with a formal presentation and paper for the group.
Right. So certainly when I was campaigning on the doorstep, there was a lot of scepticism about the RPZ, although everyone knew it needed to happen because it's been a persistent issue for 20 odd years. But it would be really useful for next time, although I probably won't be here unless I'm in reserve again, but just to have more of a detailed explanation about the funding, because a lot of people always think it's the cash cow. The reason we brought it in was simply just to fill the holes and make more money for vanity projects. So I think it's really important that we make that clear to the public that this is a self-funded thing and we're not trying to con people or introduce a stealth tax.
We'll take that away. Thanks, Ian.
I'll see what I can do to get you back next time, Ian.
Thank you. I just quickly agree with that point that Ian said. I think that's a really important public perception thing. And I would also like to make the point that, like Saskia, my ward has seen a lot of overspill from the Oldfield RPZ, and that's quite a painful process for residents because a new problem has been created that wasn't there before. There's a huge amount of parked cars, and despite a few helpful interventions where we put some double yellows in to increase visibility, there are significant problems, and I'm getting emails and phone calls every day about it. So I wanted to ask if there's any plan to look at the type of RPZs we put in, and particularly for Outer Bath, where these problems have been created as a result of overspill and secondary or third vehicles being parked potentially further out. Is there any look at the policy, I guess, and having a different approach in Outer Bath?
The policy, I think, is up on the council website on the RPZ pages, and I don't think we were particularly anticipating refreshing that policy soon. I think the ambition was that the RPZs will grow out, and that we were going to fill in some of the gaps that have been created and deal with kind of the knock-on impact of behaviour change of people kind of just trying to sneak outside the edge of the zone. But we can take that away and think about that and see whether it is timely to kind of bring forward a new policy. I think the policy was done within the last 4 years, so I don't think there was a huge appetite to go out and redo that. But we can look at that.
Okay, thank you. That's Grant and then Alex.
I also agree with Saskia about the, if we're having an agenda item, it's always good to have a robust amount of information presented to us prior to the item so that we can actually scrutinise, otherwise it's a bit pointless. And I just wanted to highlight, I don't have much important interaction with residents' parking zones, but I did want to highlight off the back of some of the things that June said, that parking enforcement is and the officers required for that is also a huge issue in our areas such as where I represent in Poulton, particularly around school times where we get lots of antisocial parking happening and there's no enforcement to do anything about it. And what we have been able to do is get some local PCSOs involved, and that does help, but it helps for the period of time that they're there, which is very infrequent because they haven't got the ability to do it all the time. So I think it is an area not only for the resident parking zones to be enforced correctly, which I think is absolutely right, but also to consider a lot of the other areas impacted by inconsiderate parking outside of Bath, because it's not just a Bath issue.
I think that's a fair point, yeah, and I'll feed that back to parking team.
Yeah, it is. We have the same problems, and I'm sure the rest of the North East Somerset does too. You're coming up to 20 minutes, and if you're splitting your time up, that's fine. So this is the last question, I think, from Alex.
Well, thank you very much for the information you gave just then. The area I represent includes the town centre in Keynsham, and we've got quite a big issue, especially where there's a lot of Victorian terrace houses where they haven't got any drives or anything, and they simply can't park because we've got council offices in the town, and a lot of councillors, council officers, they get free parking, they don't often park in the car parks. I was wondering if it'd be possible to meet with you and possibly Manda about discussing if there's anything that can be done in the centre of Keynsham in regard to residents parking.
Yeah, as I understand it, there is one small residents parking zone somewhere in Keynsham. I'm not totally tuned in.
I think Councillor Burnett lives on that street.
Oh, okay. Perfect. But I think we are keen to kind of look at where there's a desire and where there's a kind of residents' request, particularly where the feeling is that residents are getting shunted out by commuters or by, albeit maybe people visiting the council office or whatever, to make sure that we're protecting those parking areas for residents. So we're very keen to look at that and meet that. As we're working through our thinking around the pipeline, we're keen to kind of include Keynsham in our thinking. Yeah.
The Liverpool neighbourhoods, if we...
So sorry, I've just remembered. There's a street in Westmoreland Ward, Vernon Park. Has that been excluded, unbeknownst to me, from this RPZ? Because I noticed that they had not yet lined it, and yesterday I got an email saying about it, and I thought, hang on a minute, why has that not been done?
There were some loose ends on cattle jumping, which were to do with sequencing of resurfacing, or so not wanting to go and paint in the bays and then the following week resurface the road. So I think that might be next week.
Is Vernon Park being resurfaced?
No, I think...
Oh, I'm getting confused.
Don't get ahead of yourself. There were some snagging issues. They'll be addressed next week.
Next week.
Ah, right, because that's a desperate road that needs it. And I did actually have to raise it separately because it was originally, before the consultation, it was excluded, and I did raise the fact that they would like it there.
Yeah, so hopefully that will be resolved quickly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to Liverpool neighbourhoods, yeah?
Yeah, so the Liverpool neighbourhoods process. So as you probably are all aware, again, the aim of the programme is about improving residential streets, encouraging safe, active and sustainable forms of transport, walking, wheeling, cycling, so making our residential areas less of somewhere that somebody wants to drive through, cut in a corner, and more about for the residents and as a nice place to live. Before the election in the last 4 years, a huge amount of work was done about getting this programme up and running. So the policy was put in place. 15 livable neighbourhoods were identified as our starter, with lots of co-design work done with communities. 3 of those elements of those 15 were then brought forward for trial experimental through traffic restriction trials. So that's Church Street in Widcombe, Southlands in Weston, and Queen Charlton Lane. Out of the 15 broad schemes, there have been over 108 potential traffic interventions that have been identified within the schemes. In terms of the funding element, Baines Council have put £1 million into effectively the programme in the last 4 years, and the expectation is that WECA is going to fund another £6 million, but this is subject to the WECA process. The WECA money comes from the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement Programme, and there's some quite clear criteria within the livable neighbourhood element about that the schemes or the criteria have to be about promoting modal shift from cars to public transport, walking and cycling, to reduce carbon emissions and particular emissions, to line up with the objectives and nationally around bus and cycling strategies, and to promote active travel, focus on traffic congestion and improve air quality. So since May, the challenge has been about how do we take forward the schemes that we've identified and get them into action. And we've had The challenge of kind of, as I said, a tight team, officer team who deliver both the RPZs and the livable neighbourhoods. We've also had the challenges of inflation on construction costs, which has meant what we kind of thought were originally was going to be affordable, maybe is going to buy us less in the new world. And then the added bonus has been the government rhetoric playing to a very pro-motorist agenda that we've heard over the summer. Albeit that the national policy doesn't seem to have changed yet, but there's noise about that, which just is slightly worrying. So where we're up to is we've been refining and trying to move the fantastic, rich community engagement work into a clear programme over the next 2 years of what we're going to deliver. And in particular, we're bringing forward the idea of identifying another approximately 5, we're still working on the details, traffic restriction measures that we can do experimentally, like the 3 that we did in the previous 4 years, to hopefully bring forward, aiming for December, maybe spilling into spring next year to deliver those. And what we're hoping then for the November meeting is to come forward with a kind of detailed kind of Gantt chart type thing, which will then give you that breakdown of how we're going to deliver the schemes. In parallel, the key piece then to release the money so that we can deliver these schemes, because we've nearly spent the 1 million of the Baines money, so we need the WECA money, is to make sure that we do the full business case process properly and make sure that we've got the WECA kind of on board with what our direction of travel, and then that works. So that piece of work is already been kicked off, and we're anticipating that the full business case is going to WECA at the December time, end of December, with a view that then hopefully we get the answer back from WECA probably February, March time, which then enables us to progress forward into full implementation. So at this stage, we're kind of really saying that we're hoping to bring forward before Christmas 5 more experimental schemes. We're also planning to do, and this should be landing quite soon on people's mats, an evaluation of the 3 existing experimental schemes to kind of get the feedback and decide whether they were a good experiment or whether we want to withdraw them or whether they need some changes. So that's also going to happen. So in terms of for the conversation for today, I guess I really was wanting us to kind of maybe focus on 3 broad questions. One was, we've got the 15 schemes that we're pedalling as fast as the team can around trying to work out how we deliver those as fast as we can, and to kind of really particularly be able to point that here are some livable neighbourhoods that we've delivered. But we've also got, in that process of getting to the 15, we've got a pipeline of another 70 schemes that were proposed by the councillors from the previous administration. So one of the questions I'd like to ask the panel to think about is, for phase 2, how do we prioritise? Do we go back out? We've got a whole load of new councillors. Do we go back out and kind of take views about whether there are new ideas? Are some of those 70 actually no longer relevant because we put in RPZs in some bits of those areas and the like? So there's something about help around us thinking about the forward pipeline. The second bit is about thinking about funding, and so while the WECA money clearly and the government money is clearly very welcome and has enabled us to kind of move this forward, it also creates a rate limiting step around making sure we meet the criteria set. So moving forward about what people's reflections are about how we have a sustainable programme of livable neighbourhoods moving forward, and how we do that within what is quite a tight financial climate at the moment. And the third bit that it's worth kind of reflecting on as well is that we spent quite a lot of time doing the co-design, and we kind of almost did the Rolls-Royce on co-design on the 15 schemes and did a lot of engagement. So moving forward, I'd be interested to hear really whether the panel feel that we still want to do that level of Rolls-Royce engagement, which takes a lot of time, it raises lots of expectations, which we may or may not be able to deliver, or do we want to kind of come down to it still what is a sensible level of community engagement on the co-design piece. So that probably was where I was going to get to for today.
That's good. You've got 10 minutes to go. So
yeah, could I just ask which are the 5 schemes that are going to be rolled out? Do we know that off the top of your head?
We weren't wanting to release that yet because we're still doing the detailed technical work on it, but we're hoping that will be something that we'll be able to release very soon.
Okay. So your third question was about the Rolls-Royce consultation or co-design. I mean, if that's going to create lots more delay, I think this has been going on for a long time. It's become politicised, certainly nationally, certainly in places like Oxford, we've seen that. I know Rochdale were setting fire to the planters. So, really, I think we should speed things up as quickly and as fairly as we can, because if we get local neighbourhoods implemented, the residents are going to see the benefits of those rather than being anti them. And going back to Grant's question to Ollie earlier about perceptions and the echo chambers and the anti group. I mean, if we are seeing them implemented and we see them working, we're seeing they're effective, that's actually going to help educate people. The facts will be there before them to see.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, and I'm conscious that Malcolm, sitting opposite me, who has been lobbying quite hard for the Circus Lower Lansdowne scheme, and that would be a great potential showcase of something really visible where we could kind of show a scheme that really people could understand what a livable neighbourhood is all about.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I have a question about the criteria from WECA. So I'm very concerned that some of the designs that have been approved by a single member decision, for example, Mount Road, don't include through traffic restrictions, so they include softer measures like speed cushions, controlled crossings, which, as I believe Dan Norris has explicitly said, cannot be funded unless there is a hard measure involved. So I'm very worried that we will have spent that 1 million and we will not get the 6 million. So I just want to reiterate that we need to meet those criteria, otherwise we lose out on a lot of money and we lose out on a lot of very good plans that we have and that I really want to see put in place.
That's a really useful point, and we're looking very carefully at making sure that we do meet that criteria. So that's the piece of work that we're doing around the business case workup and making sure that we've got a good... I think there's a little index of kind of what is the impact on traffic reduction measures, and I think we're going to be... That number will bounce. I think the 15 schemes will be bundled together in the full business case, and that number will link to the whole schemes altogether. But we'll be looking very carefully, as you say, about some of the details and about whether some of the schemes actually fit well in the livable neighbourhood scheme or could be delivered in a different route. Yeah.
Thank you. Just looking at the council website here of the 15 areas which have been done, only 2 of them, Temple Cloud and Whitchurch Village and Queen Charlton, are in North East Somerset. Are there any plans to have any more out in the sticks, as it were, rather than in Bath?
Yeah, the ambition was to have more of a balanced programme for the 15, but through that prioritisation programme that happened in the last 4 years, I don't think we had as many North East Somerset schemes proposed. But I think that will change, and I think there's an enthusiasm around that. So thinking through about the pipeline, about what happens beyond the 15, it's probably going to keep us entertained probably the next 2 years, and probably a wee bit more delivering the 15. But we need to be thinking about that pipeline and thinking what else. And it needs, as you say, it needs to be reflective of the whole authority, and we need to be looking across the piece. I think the Queen Charlton one, my understanding is that has been viewed. I don't want to preempt the questionnaire, but we've been getting a lot of positive vibes, and that was a really positive scheme.
Yeah, I've had the same vibe, as it were.
Thank you. You said about using Malcolm's as a showcase.
Possibly. I was saying, yeah. I just was conscious across the room.
All I was going to say was, because obviously you've got to compare you've got to show like for like. Do you know what I mean? And Malcolm's area might be incredibly different, and the end results might not be the same as in a very different sort of area.
Yeah, I know. Within the 15, you'll see quite a range of schemes that have been offered. So some are one-way streets or on the edge of Newbridge. So there is a range. So you're absolutely right. It needs... What is a neighbourhood in one area is quite different to a neighbourhood in another area, and a city centre or edge of city centre location is very different from well, my ward, for example. Yeah.
Thank you. I had 2 points. Firstly, on the consultation question, Joel, I think it's really important that we move forward in a kind of like project managed fashion where we have kind of timescales and are able to stick to them. So being relatively, not necessarily quick, but swift is important. However, I wouldn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because I think with these schemes, they are controversial. There is a lot of noise out there. We have to do engagement. Part of our job is to bring people with us and have those conversations about what people want. So I think that's a really good thing about how Baines has gone about livable neighbourhoods so far, and I wouldn't want to lose that ethos. Maybe learn from the first 15 and what could be streamlined. Some of the meetings I went to weren't brilliantly attended, which was a real wasted opportunity, but the fact that we were out there trying to engage I thought was really, really important. And then the second point, what's my second point? Oh yeah, around the funding situation. I find it really confusing. I remember the Transport Minister back in May talking about how he was going to stop active travel money being spent on low traffic neighbourhoods. What impact does that have on our livable neighbourhood scheme? So that does the Mayor want us to do things in one way and the government wants us to do things in another? How are we supposed to navigate that?
It's confusing. All the assurances we've had is that the monies that have been identified are there and that the criteria are clear. So Saskia kind of made reference to some of those. So we're progressing on that basis, and the current understanding is that this is the programme. I'm not sure whether the 6 million is sitting in Recca's bank account, but they're very clear and have been with the officers that as long as we meet the criteria and go through the full business case appropriately, that we will then secure that money. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to comment on the engagement as well. I think it's very important that we let people experience the interventions, so with an ETRO, and then do proper consultation. So I think it's very hard for people to understand what the effect will be on their streets, and I think once you experience it, that is when we need to get the feedback, and things like interventions like planters in Southlands, they are actually really cheap to take out again, so that is not an issue. So I would say, be bold, like it's one of our values in this council. Let's be bold, put in the intervention, and then do proper consultation.
Yeah, that's a helpful comment, and kind of the piece of work that we've been trying to do, and we'll be bringing forward the detail on soon, was trying to identify as many of those experimental interventions that we can do early to try and inform that process. Yeah.
Thank you. You did raise one question just after you made your statement about where we go beyond the 15. You said 100 and, how many was it, 170 odd? 70 odd, not 170 odd. That was close. I mean, I think it would be good to do a review of those and look at them again as to whether actually they are appropriate or suitable to implement, or whether there needs to be some changes. And there's been such a change in administration. I would certainly be, as a new member, be interested in working with you about the schemes that were put forward previously and whether they're still relevant or not.
That's helpful, and we'll start to do a bit of that thinking quite quickly around kind of, but in some ways the primary focus is then getting the show on the road really for the next 2 years to kind of make sure that we secure the funding and deliver the existing, but we need to be thinking about that.
Thank you, Chair. Will there be any school streets as part of the 5 ETRs? Could you tell us something about that?
I don't want to preempt the kind of thinking, but certainly in the 15, one of the proposals does have, certainly one and possibly even 2 of them have school street elements to them. The challenge is about that will require engagement with the schools as well. But yeah, we're keen to look at that if we can.
Yeah, I'm keen on school streets as well, Saskia. Seems like a brilliant idea to me. Okay, are there any more questions? Well, Joel, I have to say you're so impressive. You have about 20 seconds left, so brilliant job. that's fine. Thank you very much for coming. It's a complex area and difficult to actually get the point across, and we look forward to seeing you next time with a detailed before the meeting. Details before the meeting. Thank you very much. Okay, we move on to the local food growing discussion. This is a policy activity, and we did have, for those of you who were there, quite an interesting discussion at the pre-meeting, which I think may help focus the time we have left, which is about 20 minutes. So I think I'm handing over to you, Kerry, to give us a little bit of background.
Yeah, just a brief introduction from me. Members will remember that we started this discussion last meeting, and really what we're talking about now is whether we include this as a topic and add it formally to our forward work programme. So I guess there's a couple of questions we need to be satisfied with in order to answer that question. And was regarding whether we can add value to the process, how we scrutinise or how we do our policy development, and then and effectively do we have executive support, because this is about policy development, so you'd be coming up with recommendations and submitting them to the cabinet member for consideration. So with that in mind, it does seem to lend itself to a task group approach. Because we wouldn't be able to do something like this justice at a panel meeting with 40 minutes. So a task and finish group, that's what it feels like the most appropriate to me. And it's worth reminding the panel that to be a member of the task and finish group, you don't necessarily need to sit on the panel. So I know we had preliminary discussions around public health potentially and the implications on that around local food growing. So if you're a councillor sitting on the health dedicated panel, there would be no restriction on you joining the task group. So I guess it's really, I've had preliminary discussions with officers and they've been quite positive about our potential involvement in this. So it's really understanding whether around timing and approach and whether we add this to our work programme. I haven't formalised terms of reference or anything like that, but potentially what you'd be looking at is what we're currently doing, what's taking place within the community, probably more importantly, and then the final part then would be identifying opportunities to improve the offer going forward, and that's where our recommendations would come from.
We talked in our pre-meeting about asking Sarah, who's not here, and she's there. Sarah! Sorry, you're hiding behind a post. Yeah, we did think that it might be helpful if there was a small addition to the budget, so that the work could be covered. But we're not talking about a massive amount. Just a little bit of officer time to guide the task group, really. Is it appropriate to? I mean, have we reached the decision as to whether we should have a task group? Because Jess.
I'd be really in favour of us doing something around local and sustainable food growing, and particularly to help guide the council on what we think the council could be doing, and could we make the timing of that relevant and useful to the budget process?
Yeah, I think you're right. Anna and then Grant. Oh, okay, Grant.
All I was going to say, I totally agree with you, Jess, as well. I do like the idea of involving the other committees and other councillors, and councillors particularly, maybe they are more focused on other areas, because I think this is quite a widespread topic and it does pitch into lots of different things. So I think that's going to be much more beneficial to do it that way.
Is that the time? Because I think we have a number. There's 4 hands up there. So I don't know, Kerry, if you. Oh, I don't know. Would you mind? I mean, it's. I don't know how many you think would be a sensible number. Kerry?
Typically, we like to work with about 5 councillors on a task group. That's sort of manageable. But obviously, if we've got a lot more interest in that, I wouldn't want to stop someone joining. But in terms of the officer support for the review, that I would provide the support to the members and draft the report on behalf of the panel, of the task group, and then that would be reported back to this committee for endorsement before we then forward it on to the cabinet member. We would then invite service experts to come and talk to the task group and external witnesses as well.
Okay. We have 5, I think, if John agrees. How do we progress to the wider council community? I mean, is that best done through our own knowledge of people that might be interested, or do we put an email out which might get a substantial number back? I don't know. I welcome your thoughts.
Is there any, I don't understand, and so this could be a stupid question, but is there a political proportionality that you have to attribute to these types of things?
For task groups, no political proportionality doesn't come into play, because then effectively it's been delegated by the proportional panel to report back. So what we can do is, on behalf of the chair, we can contact and vice chair the wider scrutiny membership, and then come back to yourselves and finalise. But I guess the question as well is around timelines and whether that's appropriate for the executive, because obviously this is a policy development opportunity, and whether working when's best for it to commence.
Right.
Yeah, could I just ask, because I've not been involved with the task force before, but what sort of time commitments would you normally expect for something like this? And can we meet in sort of evenings, or is it daytime evenings, or to fit in around full-time work commitments? Is that I'm happy for that, but with work commitments, if it's a lot of daytime stuff, it may be a problem, that's all.
Yeah, I think what we would do is, firstly, it would be a scoping exercise, so we bring in service experts to help us. We'll develop terms of reference, and then we'll identify people we'd like to come and talk to the task group. That'll tell you then how many meetings we're likely to have. I think typically there'll be remote meetings, so to give that flexibility, and that then they're not public-facing meetings, but then obviously we do report back publicly then. But you try to do a review within either 3 or 6 month chunks, so depending on the urgency. So you don't want to let it roll on too long, because this is an ad hoc task group rather than a standing task group.
Okay, have we done it then? We'll accept the 5, and we just want to check we've got the right names. And then we'll reach out to others via Kerry, and hopefully we won't have 55. Yeah? You got the names you're happy to?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Right, is there anything else that we need to think about on that? I'm really excited about it, actually. I mean, because I think this is a really excellent way forward to sort of find a new potential way of supporting a climate emergency activity with all sorts of other really good implications, like food for people who are hungry, things like that. Excellent. Anna.
I just wanted to state that I'm very sad I can't be part of the working group, but as I'm having a leave in 2 months' time, I think it's inappropriate to take a role in this. But just with my NHS physio hat on, I just wanted to put to the working party, I think there should be an emphasis on preventative medicine, especially with deprived populations. And if you are going to create a framework for this kind of concept, can I suggest maybe around sustainability, biodiversity, the carbon impact, economic viability, and education, so kind of linking in with what Ollie does, but around the education of food waste and sustainable growing in private residents. So really sad I can't do it with you guys, but please consider deprived populations when we're talking about food production.
I think we might use you as an advisor, because you've just given us a huge list of very useful information. So I don't think you will be lost.
Please contact me, but I won't be able to attend meetings because I have a baby attached to me.
Okay, excellent. Right, so watch this space, I think is where we are with that. So we move on to the final item on the agenda, which is the future activities of the panel. Grant and we three monkeys here tend to meet between meetings to finalise the agendas. But I think this next one is more or less fixed anyway, because I think we're doing Journeys to Net Zero, followed by a second edition of Joel and hopefully Manda as well, with papers attached. So I think that's more or less settled. And does anyone have anything else that... Because I know Jess has got an idea, haven't you?
Yes. I build on the discussion we had at the meeting last time, I think it was in the minutes, that it would be really good to do something around rivers and the current state of them, where we hear from people like the Local Rivers Trust, potentially Wessex Water, maybe others, about what work is going on to improve the state of our rivers, so that we can be more informed on the for our residents about what's happening.
Anna?
Thank you, Jess. That's a really good point. We went to a Resilient Day, me and my colleague took up to Dave Harding, and they had the charity there for, I'm not going to get the name, but it's the Rivers Trust for the Avon and Bristol. But yeah, and they've got some really interesting things to say. We have otters in the Chew Valley Lake, I thought that was really cool. And salmon comes up to Keynsham. So yeah, really interesting things. So if we could include them, I think there's some really interesting points about rivers, especially around the recent stuff with Wessex Water and the polluting on dry days, and I think the public can all agree that we're all quite annoyed at what's happening with the water companies and discharging into our rivers.
Can I just add, if you're talking about waterways as an avid narrowboater, could I also maybe recommend Canal as well?
So I'm actually meeting with somebody from Barts, the Bath and Avon River Trust, tomorrow, amazingly. So yeah, active stuff, because...
It's probably something I've already brought up in one of our meetings, to be fair, but I thought I'll bring it up here so that everyone's aware. But I did sort of request that we look into council house building as a key sort of strategic thing that this council should be doing. But also linked with that, we usually get an update on a homelessness update to this panel. And I think there's been some stuff in the press recently which I think could impact aspects of that update. And I think it also links quite well into council house building and provision in that area. So whether that can work as a topic, and some of you might not have even been aware that that is an item on this panel, but a big chunky one as well.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, obviously we're building council houses, but obviously it is an area that I think needs to expand as we move forward. Somebody else, June?
Yes. It was just, I totally agree about the water and the canals, but it's got nothing to do with that. Is it possible that the meetings that are not going on here, because if I'm right, the next one's Keynsham?
It is, yeah.
Is it possible to have a hybrid one, because I can't get out to Keynsham? It's not because of that.
No, I don't think the next one's Keynsham. I think the 2024 of Keynsham. No, we can't do hybrid meetings at the moment. Councillors do have to attend, so we'd have to have a look at that.
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Sorry?
We can't do hybrid meetings at the moment. Councillors do need to attend, so we'll have to have a look at that.
I'm afraid I won't be able to. At the moment, I can't do any travelling particularly, so other than walking. So that's why. Okay. So I'll see if I can get a substitute.
Well, I think you may have one, actually. Okay. Can I just point out that we would love for you to come hybridly to Keynsham. We'd love you to come to Keynsham, obviously, but particularly hybridly, it's legally we can't do it. It's not that we haven't got the technology. We just, it's a legal requirement. Yeah, it's the ones that involve the public have to be face to face. Sadly, Anna, then Saskia.
I just have to be on the next meeting, but maybe next year. Biodiversity is something that comes up quite a lot in the Chew Valley because of the agricultural land. All our biodiversity is in the hedgerows. I can't imagine Bath is very high on the biodiversity level, so I just feel like something as a council we could have more information around or policies. It doesn't have to be next meeting, but
that links quite nicely with the local plan.
Oh yes, it does, doesn't it?
Anyway,
very happy to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's a very useful addition. Somebody over there had their hand up. Saskia.
Thank you, Chair. With Great Western Railway's plans to close the Bath Spa ticket office and the consultation that has just closed, would it be possible for us to get a member briefing on what the implications are for our residents and any next steps?
May I just also add to that Oldfield Park station? Because that has a small ticket office, or which is on the brink.
It's all, pretty much all ticket offices, isn't it? I mean, so yeah, it's a problem. It's certainly a problem.
If I'm permitted, just a small observation on what Anna said about biodiversity. If it's of help and interest for the future, I think the team would be happy to talk about nature recovery as a kind of theme, possibly, and how that works across the whole Baines area.
And just linked to the food growing and biodiversity, one thought I've had for a while, and I've been approached by a number of residents who have allotments in my ward. It seems that we have a contract that allotment holders are meant to keep their plots all in good aesthetic order. I just wonder whether, given where we are in the circumstances, whether we could be a bit more lenient and consider allowing a plot holder to at least have about a quarter of their plot or a third of their plot left over for biodiversity gain, and leaving it to go wild without being penalised or thrown off.
I think, we live in a time when we know that it's a good idea to what are weeds, what are wildflowers, they're all value to the environment. So I personally don't have a problem with that at all. I know outside in North East Somerset, a lot of the parishes and town councils have views on that as well. And I think that's probably the way forward. Do you want to? Is that with this?
Yeah, I was just to say, having dealt with allotment associations and people like that, I would think that would be extremely difficult to get changed. Allotments are there for a very specific reason, and I think that aspect of letting something just grow wild on an allotment space is an insufficient use of what that's meant to be there for, and it will feed in probably to the discussions with the local food growing. But you will face a lot of opposition if that was something you were suggesting.
I don't think you were suggesting it was all going to go wild, is it? You're talking about a little corner.
Yeah, just a small part. We're all being encouraged to have a little bit of a wild area in our own gardens, so I just wonder whether the same principle could be applied to specifically Baines owned plots, perhaps, rather than parish council or private plots.
I just wanted to say I totally agree, and I actually adopted Oldfield Park Station 17 years ago, and I did say when they come and trim it, to give a nice defined shape of a circle or a triangle, and then you can let that section grow wilder, and people will be aware that it's deliberately left there. So if you go down there, you should see these odd shapes, and then everything's looking wild. Only in places, of course. The rest is better maintained.
Right. Okay. Amazingly, we've been amazingly brilliant today because it's actually 12 o'clock. So I think I should close the meeting. Thank you very much. I need to talk to you.